Ed Gallagher here, professor of Christian Scripture at Heritage Christian University in Florence, Alabama, and I am in our school's library, the Overton Memorial Library, where I'm going to introduce you to a few more recent acquisitions by our library, a few more books that have recently come in. These are not all brand new books, at least two of them are brand new. Three of them are pretty new. And then a couple of them are a little bit older, but still, the library just got a copy of them, so I'm going to point them out to you. Let me mention again that if you are if you live in the Shoals area, you are welcome to come into our library and get a library card, learn from the books here, maybe check them out. You'll want to talk to our librarian, Jamie Cox, about that. And certainly, if you're a student at Heritage Christian University, we also welcome you to make use of these resources. All right, the first book I'm going to mention, this one is pretty new, 2024 publication date. It is Matthew Goff's book called The Apocrypha, a Guide. Now, Matthew Goff is a professor, probably of religious studies, I would imagine, at Florida State University. He's well known in biblical studies. This is a volume, it's published by Oxford. You can see how thick it is. Let's see, 314 pages is the last page of the index. Now, this book, it's written for a general audience. So if you have never read the Apocrypha before, you don't know anything about the Apocrypha, this is the book for you. This is a book that is supposed to introduce you to the Apocrypha. Like I say, it's written for a general audience. He's going to try to make it light and accessible. Not a scholarly book. In fact, there is not a single footnote. I think there's no references at all to scholarly my bad. There are at the end of every chapter, there's a guide for further reading. But I think I am still correct that there are no footnotes, no references, but you do have guides to further reading. In fact, there's no bibliography at the end of the book. There is an index, as I mentioned, but you just have the text of the book. The text of the book ends on page 304, and then you have the index, and that's all there is. So this is a book that marches through each of the books of the Apocrypha one by one. So there's a chapter on the book of Judith. There's a chapter on, well, let me just see. The first chapter, for some reason, is on, well, it's actually on the book known in the Septuagint as First Esdras, known in the Latin Bible as Third Ezra. Okay, that's chapter 2, actually. The first chapter is just an introduction. What are the books of the Apocrypha? The book's called Apocrypha. Chapter 2 is on First Esdras. Chapter 3 is on Fourth Ezra. Now, both of those books, I mean, if you think of the books of the Apocrypha as the books that are in the Catholic Bible that are not in the Protestant Bible, and that's a good way to think of it, but neither one of those books are in the Catholic Bible. First Esdras and Fourth Ezra, they are both in the appendix to some editions of the Latin Vulgate, but they're not counted as scripture among Roman Catholics. Anyway, then there's a chapter on Tobit and a chapter on Judith, and so it marches through the books of the Apocrypha one by one. I think it'd be a helpful book. The very last chapter is read the Apocrypha. It's just a few pages long, encouragement to actually read the texts. So this is a book that is in this series published by Oxford called Guides to Sacred Texts. That's a series that covers all kinds of sacred texts, actually. So, like Hindu texts and, I don't know, the Buddhist tantras, the classical Upanishads. These are different volumes in this series, Guides to Sacred Texts. There are, I think, 3 volumes in this series so far that would be interesting to people who are interested in the Christian Bible. This book, of course, the Apocrypha, and then there's a book on the New Testament written by Donald Senior or Senior, I guess, and then there's the Book of Common Prayer, which is that one's written by Charles Heffling. Um, so. Another book published by Oxford. This is in a different series. It's called Essentials of Biblical Studies. So all the volumes in this series are going to concentrate on, well, biblical studies. Now, let me tell you, this particular book is David deSilva's book. It's the title, you can see it better there, Judea Under Greek and Roman Rule. And yeah, this one. Does this one have a, yeah, also a 2024 publication date. Okay. So you can see how thick it is. It's the index ends on page 204, so not very long. In fact, this one does have a bibliography and then an index. It's still, this book is written for students, I guess. I don't know, maybe this series is more like written for the general reader, perhaps, and this series is more written for undergraduate students or something. Still, people who don't know much. This series is written for those people. What was I doing? So the text of the book ends on page 182. So it's still going to be sort of light, but there are footnotes. Yes, I did check. I am cited. That means this must be a good book. Um, and let's see, this is I mean, you saw the title, right? Judea under Greek and Roman rule. So it's a history book. Let me read you the first line of the introduction. This book provides a reconstruction of the history of Judea from 334 BCE, when Alexander's eastward conquests brought Judea into the Greek Empire, through 135 CE, when Hadrian, the Roman emperor, refounded Jerusalem as Aelia Capitolina and banished Jews from the city limits. A formative period both for early Judaism and the Christian movement. Yes, that is all one sentence, but it tells you what is going to happen. It's going to be a pretty easy overview, but it's a history book. We got 6 chapters of between, usually about 20 or 30 pages. Some of them get a little bit longer. No, about 20 or 30 pages a chapter. Like I say, the bibliography starts on page 183, so you got the whole book there. Other volumes in this series, by the way, so besides this, oh, David deSilva, by the way, let's see, I'm reading on the back. He teaches at Ashland Theological Seminary in Ohio. Uh, I mean, anybody in biblical studies, especially New Testament, knows who David deSilva is. I think he's a Methodist, right? In terms of religion, and that does play in. He's an evangelical scholar, but he's well known outside of that context as well in terms of just a scholar. Published a whole bunch of stuff. All right, this series. Let me tell you about this series. So besides this one by deSilva, we've got a volume on the Psalms by Keith Bodner. Early Jewish Writings and New Testament Interpretation by C.D. Elledge. An Invitation to Biblical Poetry by Elaine T. James. An Introduction to the Gospels and Acts by Alicia D. Myers. Ancient Israel's Neighbors by Brian R. Doak. And then, the next one is Sin in the New Testament. That's interesting, by Jeffrey Syker. So a lot of interesting volumes in that series, but the one that our library just got is this one by deSilva, the history book. All right, this is an older volume. This is Dale Martin's book called Inventing Superstition, and the subtitle is From Hippocrates to the Christians. So the idea, I think, of older, 2004, is when this book was published by Harvard University Press. The idea, I think, is that superstition became a thing at some point, like something that people knew about in antiquity. And Dale Martin is going to tell us how that process went, how it developed, so that superstition became invented, separated out from religion, and became its own sort of category. Um, let's see. What do we want to know about this book? 300 and page 307 is where the index ends. There is a bibliography, and then there are endnotes. Boo. Let's see. So when does the text of the book actually end? Page 243, the text of the book ends, and then the notes begin. Let's see. We've got a preface and then 13 chapters, and then there's a conclusion. The conclusion's about 20 pages long. So some of the chapters. Chapter 1, Superstitious Christians. Chapter 2, Problems of Definition. Chapter 3, Inventing Deisidaimonia. The subtitle of that chapter is Theophrastus, Religious Etiquette, and Theological Optimism. Deisidaimonia is often translated, that's a Greek word, often translated superstition. But then, of course, superstition is a Latin term, superstitio. So he talks about that as well. Dale Martin, he taught at Duke for a little bit of time, then he taught at Yale for a long time. He taught at Yale from the 90s to around 2020. He is now retired. Is that good on that book? Yeah, I think so. Oh, one more thing about it. I mean, you can tell, I know that the sticker uh, disguises it a little bit, but if you look at the way that title is written, it looks, what should we say, that it's trying to be fun, I guess. It's not like straight characters. The font is a little goofy, I guess. And that happens sometimes. Let me see if it happens in every chapter. Yeah, like chapter 1, that W, like all the text is like the straight standard font, but then the very beginning you've got that goofy W. I guess, that's supposed to appeal to the common reader. And Dale Martin does say that um, this is the first sentence of the second paragraph of the preface. I have attempted to write for a generally educated audience. All right. Next book. This is brand new, the Oxford Handbook of Deuteronomy. This is edited by Don C. Benjamin. Let me see if I can tell you who that is. He taught biblical and Near Eastern studies at Arizona State and Rice. Okay, good enough on him, on the editor. This is in, of course, a series, and the series is the Oxford Handbooks, and there are a ton of Oxford Handbooks. Now, these are always going to be super expensive when they're first published in hardback, like this one is. I'm guessing this book costs 150 bucks. You'll see that this is actually not all that thick. As Oxford Handbooks go, a lot of them are much thicker than this. So this is a sort of a smaller version of the Oxford Handbook. The last page of the index is page 510, which is not too long. A lot of times these Oxford Handbooks go to 1,000 pages. But like I say, they're going to be expensive. I would guess $150, maybe 200 for this one. So you're better off finding it in a library. Um, Let's see. And the Oxford Handbook series covers just all kinds of topics, just all kinds. I mean, stuff that doesn't have anything to do with Christianity, of course, or the Bible. I wouldn't be, I mean, I'm sure there's an Oxford Handbook on Shakespeare. There's probably an Oxford Handbook on Hamlet. There's probably an Oxford Handbook on, I don't know, just Russia, just all kinds of stuff. But then there's a ton of Oxford handbooks that are relevant to biblical studies. There is an Oxford handbook on biblical studies, for instance, or an Oxford handbook on the Septuagint, an Oxford handbook on the Dead Sea Scrolls, an Oxford handbook on the Gospels, probably. I'm not sure about that. But I just saw over there, there's an Oxford handbook um, on the writings of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the writings of the Hebrew Bible. There's, I think there's an Oxford handbook on the Psalms. There's an Oxford handbook on the prophets. There's an Oxford handbook on the minor prophets. So it just covers all kinds of stuff. This is an Oxford handbook on Deuteronomy. I'm not sure whether there's an Oxford handbook on the Torah or the Pentateuch. There probably is. I think there's an Oxford handbook on biblical law. Anyway, this one just covers Deuteronomy. So all these Oxford handbooks are going to go sort of the same kind of way. They are all anthologies of different articles written by different scholars. So, this is the table of contents. You can see what that looks like. So, chapter one, The Literary History of Deuteronomy by Anselm C. Hagedorn. Chapter two, Near Eastern Practice of Law in Deuteronomy by Stephen C. Russell. Chapter three, Deuteronomy, Code or Covenant by Ann K. Knoffel. And then on down the line. So we've got 30 chapters here written by different scholars, experts in their area, and that's how all the Oxford handbooks are. And it's going to be a summary of scholarship. That's what it is. I mean, I think it's trying, how does it pitch? Definitely not pitched to like a normal audience, but not pitched necessarily to experts. I mean, experts are going to find these valuable, but probably pitched more to like graduate students, I would imagine, is the way we should think of the Oxford handbooks. So, if you're studying Deuteronomy, this is going to be super helpful for trying to summarize just all kinds of stuff in the study of Deuteronomy. Um, but again, not written for a general audience. Let me tell you the sections. There are those 30 chapters. They're divided into 5 sections. Section 1, literary development of Deuteronomy. Section 2, literary motifs in Deuteronomy. So motifs. Chapter 6 is monotheism and Deuteronomy. Well, that's going to be interesting. That's written by Matthew Lynch. Love and Hate in Deuteronomy is chapter 9 by Francois Mirguet, maybe. Chapter 10 is War in Deuteronomy. That's interesting, by Pekka Pitkanen. Um, okay, section 3 is the social world of Deuteronomy. So we've got chapters on Israel or women or the scribes, the priests and Levites, the stranger, fatherless, and widow, which is a phrase that gets used a lot in Deuteronomy, and on down the line. Okay, section 4, intertextuality of Deuteronomy. And then section 5, reception history of Deuteronomy. And here's where you have chapters on like the Dead Sea Scrolls. You've got a chapter on the New Testament. You've got a chapter on Rabbinic Judaism. You've even got a chapter on Islam, Deuteronomy and Islam, and then several others as well. Now, the last book I'm going to mention to you is this huge thing. This is in a series. The series is called Brill's New Pally. But this one, I'm pointing out to you, the library just got this historical atlas of the ancient world. You can see it's big. I mean, like physically big. It's not all that thick. Let me see. 300 pages or so. There is an index, but I mean, it's an atlas. So basically what you got is you got these nice maps, and across from all the maps is like a commentary on the map. So can you find these maps online somewhere? Can you find good enough maps? Probably good enough for most purposes, but this is more of a scholarly resource where you can trust that like an expert has vetted it and they're explaining the map as well. Is this interesting for biblical studies? Well, yeah, I mean to some extent. There is an index, not an, I mean, there is an index, but there's a table of contents. And so there are maps on, it's a historical atlas of the ancient world. What is that ancient world? Well, we've got maps of Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia. It does not concentrate on Israel, all right? But like the Hittites come up. And then we've got the Persian Empire. We've got maps of the Achaemenid Kingdom, that is the Persian Empire, the Persian Wars against Greece. We've got Alexander the Great and maps related to him, the Roman Empire and maps related to that. And it goes all the way up to the Byzantine Empire, 5th to 15th centuries BC. And it looks like that's about where it ends. Yep. All right. So, I mean, it might be useful, at least something to check. So, like I say, if you want to come and look at these books, I know, it's the physical books. I like physical books. So come into our library, check it out. These are going to be useful for a lot of people.